The seabed search for MH370 remains in full swing. It is now 12 days into phase 2 of the third seabed search. Today is March 23rd. I am aviation journalist Jeff Wise. I'm going to tell you where they have been looking and why. And I'm also going to give you some interesting and intriguing information about one of the most important and influential characters in the MH370 community. And all that's happening right now. First up, what is going on with Ocean Infinity's search vessel Armada 7806? Well, in the last episode, which I posted a week ago, the ship had just restarted scanning the seabed with its fleet of 3 AUVs after taking a break to resupply near Perth, Australia. It had come back and it had started searching virgin territory. This is seabed that hadn't been scanned before beyond the 7th ping arc that was defined by the plane's final SATCOM transmission. This was in contrast to the first phase of the search, which had searched out gaps in previously scanned parts of the seabed. Obviously, that first part had come out empty. The plane was not there. Now, last week, it seemed, in my estimation, that the ship and its AUVs seemed to be starting a strip of seabed. That's how they scanned the last time back in 2018. You basically send down robot subs and they go back and forth across the bottom, shining their sonar beams on the seabed back and forth. It's a lot like how a scanner goes back and forth when it scans a document, or you could think of it the way that when you're mowing the lawn, you lay down strip after strip in a very tidy way so you don't leave any gaps. This is a very orderly way of searching. It's quite different from what they were doing in phase 1, which was filling in gaps, which is more like filling in potholes in a road where you go from spot to spot. So it should be much more orderly. It should be much more predictable. But while there presumably is very regular behavior by the AUVs down there under 3 miles of ocean, we can only assume that because all we can see is the movement of the ship on the surface, which is being reported via satellite to the AIS, or Automated Identification System. To get this data via provider like marinetraffic.com, and you have to pay for it. And as I've noted before, Kevin Rupp has very generously been sharing that data with the public that he has paid for. As we can see here, the track of the Armada 7806 is not particularly orderly at all. It's zigzagging all over the place. And as it goes back and forth collecting AUVs that, presumably are at their end of their battery life and then redeploying them with a fresh charge. But there does seem to be a certain kind of order in this zigzaggy chaos. It's almost like rings of a ladder to me. That's what I see. I think that I'm guessing that these are roughly correlated with the amount of seabed that the AUVs can search in each duty cycle. Just me guessing. Based on the fact that they searched those data gaps in phase 1 and that they're now searching a strip far beyond the 7th arc, I think what we're seeing is confirmation of what we've suspected for a long time, namely that the analysis that's motivating this search is the analysis made by Victor Iannello and his colleagues back in 2023, and then refined since. This is a map that Victor published alongside that analysis at that time. You can see Zone 1 is the inner area that had already been searched with its data gaps. Zone 2 is the new territory that they're now searching. Here's a more recent map that Victor has published. It's been a little bit modified, and I think is a better illustration of what they're doing right now. Here we see his proposed search area in red. This is the virgin terrain that he recommended searching. And here's the track, I'll superimpose over it, the track of Armada 7806 in the current phase of the search. As you can see, the shape of the strip that they're searching is very similar to what Victor proposed. But they started quite a bit further south, and they're looking a little bit further away from the 7th arc. So about 55 nautical miles rather than at 15 nautical miles, more or less. So they're giving themselves a somewhat wider margin of error. Now, you'll remember that there are various spots in this general area that have been singled out by independent researchers as being, in their estimation, likely endpoints where the wreckage of MH370 might be found. One that's gotten a lot of attention in particular is a hotspot by Jean-Luc Marchand and Patrick Blelly, who are French independent researchers. They spent a lot of time making the case for a spot that you see here centered on, this is 93 degrees east longitude. Ocean Infinity is right in the thick of that right now. In fact, they've searched most of it at this point. I imagine that Misters Marchand and Blelly are on the edge of their seats right now. I mean, this is what they proposed is actually being searched right now. So good luck, guys. A question I've been interested in is how quickly they're searching. Like, what is the rate that they're doing this at? We can't tell, obviously, with any accuracy. We're just kind of, again, reading the tea leaves. But given that all we can see from the motion of the ship on the surface, if we compare the area that they've been working from last weekend to where they are now, we see that they've pretty much gone from about 1,000 square kilometers to, by my rough calculation, about 5,200 square kilometers. So let's call it 4,000 square kilometers in a week. Now, if they do follow Victor's red rectangles and go beyond it to the same extent that they exceeded it at the start, they will definitely go well over 15,000 square kilometers, which wouldn't surprise me at all. A big question we're looking at now is how long the ship will keep going on this current swing. A reasonable assumption is that they have to go back to port every month to swap out crew. We don't really know that for sure. I guess maybe some people would tell me that that is definitely true. I don't know. Unfortunately, one thing we've learned in the last few weeks is that we cannot trust the destination and ETA that's displayed in marine tracking. So I think we'll just have to wait and see. We have no control over this matter anyway. Whatever they're going to do, they're going to do. Kevin Rupp is saying that in order to get back to Fremantle for the 1 month switchover, they'll have to leave the current search area on March 28th. So they have less than a week to go, if he's right. My expectation is that when they come back, they'll go right back to mowing the lawn on the strip that they're working right now. That would make sense to me. They'll go working their way probably towards the end of Victor's area 2 and maybe beyond. And then what? They might do more strips. Maybe they'll work inward from the 7th arc to the northwest, or extending further outward from the 7th arc to the southeast. However long they decide to go, I think this is going to be the last seabed search, because after this, there really will be no analytical justification for search anywhere else, unless new and convincing evidence really does emerge. You'll remember we talked about this in an earlier episode. The further out you go from the 7th arc, the lower the probability density gets. And by the time you get to like 140, it's just essentially zero. And by that point, it has gotten so low that it seems not. It's up. I mean, it's Ocean Infinity's money. They can search however they want to, but your probability density is getting so thin that you have to wonder if it's really worth your time, because the odds are just so long. And at that point, if they search up to a point where even they throw in the towel, having searched 120,000 square kilometers in 2018, another how many tens of thousands of square kilometers now, not having found it, not having really analytical basis for searching further in this area, what do we do now? What is next? Do we obviously throwing in the towel, giving up on MH370 is not an option. Now, I have no doubt that some people will say, okay, the ocean is big. If it didn't work out, they just got unlucky. What are you going to do? I disagree with that attitude. The data that we have is actually quite precise. There was considerable evidence, and it has known precision. And so any reasonable flight path that you can imagine will result in an endpoint that will already have been searched. What that means is that as far as endpoints in the Southern Ocean, we will have run out of ideas. So what do we do? Where do you go after you try everything and nothing works? I've been saying for a long time that the question we should have been asking ourselves from the get-go is there any way that we could have misinterpreted the data? Is there any way that the Inmarsat data could have been altered by either natural or man-made processes so that it doesn't mean what we think it means? The answer to that is a partial no. The BTO data, if you look at how it's generated, is almost impossible to alter. But the other part, the BFO data, well, it turns out that it can be tampered with through a vulnerability that we've talked about a fair bit on this podcast. A lot of technical heavy lifting was done by an independent researcher named Victor Iannello. Yes, Victor Iannello, the same Victor Iannello we talked about a minute ago. Back in 2015, he wrote a white paper called Northern Routes and Burst Frequency Offset for MH370, in which he points out that if you change a single parameter inside the satellite data unit, then it would produce BFO values that make the plane look like it went south when it was really going north. Now remember, the satellite data unit is the box that produced all of the data, and we don't really know how it got turned on. It's a real stretch to imagine that the captain, Zahari Ahmad Shah, could have done it. Either that he would have the motivation to do it or that he would know how to do it. So the SDU is a big mystery. And it turns out that if you tamper with it through a vulnerability that Victor explained, you could produce what we could call a trail of false breadcrumbs, making the plane look like it went into the southern Indian Ocean when it really went north into Central Asia. So that would be a simple explanation for how it is that the plane might not actually be on the southern seabed. Now, I want to say a little bit about Victor Iannello because, as I've said, science is a communal undertaking. It doesn't come out of, stone tablets from heaven. It's made by people. And it matters who those people are. We should have a sense of whether those people have the background to know what they're talking about. Victor, who lives in Roanoke, Virginia, he is an alumnus of MIT, where he got a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and a doctorate in nuclear engineering. He's an inventor and an entrepreneur. He invented a frictionless bearing that has been taken up by major companies all around the world. He founded the engineering company Radiant Physics. I got to know him through the independent group where we both were founding members. And even after I got kicked out, he was very helpful in sharing his ideas. Since then, he's remained a stalwart of the MH370 community. He writes deeply researched papers and analyses that he publishes on his website. He was thanked by name in the ATSB official final report on the disappearance of MH370. More recently, he's been one of the leading voices in trying to explain why the whisper theory, WSPR theory, is completely nonsensical. So in short, in my estimation, Victor is a person who, even though I disagree with him quite profoundly on some things, he has a deep technical background, and he knows what he's talking about. And B, he has the character to tell the truth as he sees it and to change his mind if new data comes up, which is essential to science. In the years since Victor wrote that paper, I've asked a number of experts in aviation cybersecurity if the attack that Victor describes is plausible. And I think that Todd Humphreys summed it up best. Todd is a professor at the University of Texas. He's the first person to publicly demonstrate how to take over a vessel's navigation system through GPS spoofing. This is what he told me.
The idea here is that we have exhausted all of the easy explanations for where the aircraft could be. And not only have we exhausted the easy explanations, we've done so in a fairly methodical way. The scientific team from Australia looked at the data from Inmarsat, and not only they determined that there would be this probability distribution for the aircraft should be found. And there was a high degree of internal consistency in those data that they analyzed, such that it wasn't, say, terribly noisy. It wasn't unpredictable. Things moved along the trajectory in a way that made sense right up until the end. And then X marks the spot, and the aircraft was not found at the spot.
Right.
And that is really intriguing to me. I mean, I thought of the many ways that they might have made errors in their determination of that spot, maybe because of biases in the measurements. But as you pointed out, and as I thought about it again, they're able to measure these biases fairly regularly with this aircraft during the say the 7 or 8 pings that they got from the aircraft and from other aircraft. So they know about the turnaround time when they send out a ping from the Inmarsat and they have some delay in the electronics at the aircraft, and then it comes back. If that's a time variable delay, that would be something they would know about, even
Right.
in the case of these 7 or 8 pings to the Malaysian airliner. So it's just puzzling. It really is, because it looks like a soluble problem. It looks like the amount of information that the investigators had access to was sufficient. It was also internally consistent. And yet here we are. The original search area was found not to have the aircraft, and an expanded search area was found not to have the aircraft. So that just leaves us with this puzzle where we say, now what do we do? What assumptions do we question now?
I've talked to people that worked inside the search effort. They were pretty shocked that they didn't get it. They had set their probability, their sort of Bayesian prior, as the possibility of that this data that they were basing their calculations on had been tampered with in some way, at essentially to zero. They just didn't consider it at all. And I think the reason I'd reached out to you with this description of this potential vulnerability was to raise the question of, is it really zero? I mean, for all of the complications and difficulty and expense and just unlikelihood of it, is it physically possible?
So one of the interesting facets of Bayesian estimation is that you must update your priors when you are faced with new evidence. The failed search was new evidence. After a failed search, you have to, again, recalibrate. And you ask yourself, okay, given that the search failed, do I revisit this assumption that there was no chance the data were manipulated? And I think it is entirely scientific to revisit that assumption and to say, let's open up some areas of inquiry. The trouble with applying Bayesian thinking in a really dogmatic way is that sometimes you preclude the possibility of even looking for data, looking for evidence, because you have very strong priors against such evidence. It is important that you keep your mind open as far as what sources of information you'll even contemplate looking at. And I think by this point, we've been pushed into a corner where we do need to revisit some of those very low assigned probabilities about data manipulation.
Now, I should point out that after debris started washing up in the Western Indian Ocean, Victor changed his mind, and he decided that the plane must have gone into the ocean after all. And that's why he's done so much work trying to figure out why it hasn't been found in the ocean. But if all that work comes to nothing and the plane isn't found in the southern seabed, then maybe he'll have a change of heart. Because we're going to need to find another explanation. And anything involving the southern seabed is going to start to look pretty thin if we don't find it pretty soon. Okay, that's all I have for you today. As always, if you'd like to get a free newsletter that comes out with each episode, you can sign up for that at findingmh370.com. If you enjoy the podcast and you'd like to support it, you can also sign up for a paid subscription there, which is incredibly helpful and deeply appreciated. This is Jeff Wise signing off for now. See you next time.